Good morning, everyone. It is so good to see your faces. You're really accustomed to gathering on Zoom. You know the drill. We're going to keep you muted, blah, blah, blah. Today, though, we want to try something new. Can you find a button that says participants? If you find that button that says participants, you should be able to either raise your hand or click yes or no. No, we need you to do it with the buttons. I'll tell you why in just a second. All right, Peggy raised a hand. Thumbs ups work too. We've got raised hands. All right, we're getting it. So here's why. We are going to have 3 little mini breakout rooms. And we want people to be able to opt in or opt out as to whether they want to have conversation or maybe do artwork or journal or meditate in response to the prompts. And so to put you in groups, we need to be able to know who wants to be in a group for conversation and who doesn't. So we're going to have you use that new button. It's better if you do a raised hand or a yes as opposed to a thumbs up. It's much harder for for Paul to track the thumbs ups. And in a real pinch, if you can't figure it out, you can say something in the chat. And for those of you on the phone, you can actually raise your hand by pressing *9. So *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone. So have we all figured out how to raise our hand or say yes? Awesome. Always learning, always learning. So today's service is going to have a slightly different rhythm. After our meditation and the gift of music, I'm going to briefly introduce 3 different foundational spiritual practices: listening, learning, and loving. I'll make some brief remarks on each of these 3 practices, and then I'll invite you to take some time to respond and reflect on whether and how to incorporate them into your particular way of being human. Now, when I say introduce, I don't mean to imply that you don't already know how to listen, learn, and love. But in these crazy times that we're living in, I have found that approaching them as foundational spiritual practices is helpful. And my hope is that you will as well. So that's what we're heading into. Are we ready to center down? All right, I'm going to ring the bell. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We're hoping that everyone has a candle or a chalice to light and something to light it with. Let's take a minute to light it together, and you can add your greetings to the chat while we do this. Our opening words are written by my dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Lois Van Leer. Welcome to this time, to this place and time where there is no call to shame, no pronouncement of guilt, no altar call of belief. In this place, there is an invitation to bring all of you in with you, to risk being authentically you just as you are. So shake the dust off your spirit, let down the walls around your heart. Relax fully into this body you occupy. Breathe deeply. Hear the whisper of invitation and welcome to something more. Bring your weariness, fatigue, impatience, anger, and make of it an offering, a blessing. You do not have to hold it alone. In turn, let this community offer its safe embrace. Let this place and time be a refuge, a sanctuary, a place of revelation of truths and of the self. Come into this space and time and let yourself enter into the process of shaping worth. May you go from today renewed, refreshed, and restored. May your spirit be brightened, your mind eased, your heart resting in love. Welcome. And now let's join in singing together, answering the call of love.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
And now we're going to pause for just a moment to engage in the practice of collective generosity. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, you'll notice 3 options for managing the logistics on your screen. We'd invite you to either copy down the information you need or simply go to the website to make a donation. The web address is also in the chat. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country may not be aware that we typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose missions align with our values, a program we call Month of Sundays. This month, the money will be split between the Office of Multicultural Affairs at the University of Idaho and the Office of Outreach and Education at WSU to support programs related to diversity, inclusion, and specifically the Black Lives Matter movement. Our online donation system includes a drop-down menu that allows you to choose where you'd like your money to go. And of course, if you're mailing or dropping off a check, just indicate in the memo line whether it's intended for the Month of Sundays or for our general fund. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we'll now take some time to practice generosity together as the offertory is played. And now we've come to the time in our service where we lift up joys and sorrows in the lives of members of our community. So please settle in and check in with your heart. Sorrow comes into every life. Each of us suffers losses and setbacks. Each of us struggles and sometimes knows defeat. So together we create a circle of compassion wide enough to hold all the sorrow in our hearts, all the pain in our lives. Today we have a virtual candle from the Uri family. It's not really a candle of joy or sorrow or concern, more a candle of just letting us know that their son Taran has been diagnosed with level 3 autism. A virtual candle from Karen Barron, whose breast cancer med has apparently stopped working after several years of very encouraging results. However, she'll be starting a drug trial at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, a joy. And another joy is that she knows that our community is very supportive. Joy, too, comes into every life. Hearts are made to love. This world and the people in it are unbearably beautiful. So together we create a circle of celebration that is deep enough to hold all the joy in our lives. A candle of celebration from Juno, Peterson-Pope. Joy for the continued recovery of Lindsay from pancreatitis. And another, also from Juno, for her brother Joshua, who just received a significant promotion at work. And a candle of joy from a new member of our community, Sarah Woods. She got an apartment and is so excited. She'll be moving to this area on August 18th. She can't wait and is so happy. Life, however fragile, is a gift. And we in this community of memory, caring, and hope celebrate this gift today and all days. Amen, and blessed be. And now I invite you into a time of meditation or prayer. In times of uncertainty, times of anxiety, times when the ground is shifting beneath us, we look for something to hold onto. This is normal and natural. If we're not careful, though, we find ourselves clinging to habits or ideas that hold us back, keep us from going where we need to go, keep us from changing in the ways that we need to. When rock scrambling, the rule of thumb is to always have 3 points of contact. Only one hand or foot at a time, reaching, unmoored, seeking the way forward. The 3 practices we'll explore today can be our 3 points of contact. Listen, learn, love. If we are grounded solidly in these, we can move in the ways we need to, change in the ways we need to, transform in the ways that are being called forth from us. This is not a time when we can find safe ground and stay put. It's a time for moving, for changing. This is a time of anxiety and uncertainty, but it's also a time of opportunity. Have faith, beloveds. We'll find the way forward together. Let's rest in the silence for a moment together. So as part of the service, we're going to have 3 5-minute pauses. And this is the moment where I need you to choose what you'd like to do during those times. If you want conversations, Paul is going to put you into dyads or triads. You'll be in the same groups all 3 times. So he's cleared your answers, and what I need you to do is what we just learned how to do, which is raise our hands or say yes. So click on participants. Raising hands is best. And if you would like to be part of a conversation, you want to raise your hand. And if you don't want to be part of a conversation, you can take those 3 5-minute breaks to meditate or make art or journal. I don't know, go to the bathroom, get a cup of tea, whatever works for you. So if you're not wanting to be part of a dyad or triad, just refrain from raising your hands. Okay. So the first spiritual practice we're going to think about is listening, and specifically deep listening. And the kind of listening that I am inviting you to consider as a foundational practice is really truly countercultural. We're trained in this world to discuss things, to debate with one another. And what that means is that normally when we're listening, we're analyzing. We're looking for flaws. We're trying to find faulty reasoning or cracks in their argument. Parker Palmer in A Hidden Wholeness says, everyday speech is instrumental rather than expressive, intended to achieve a goal rather than simply to tell one's own truth. When we speak instrumentally, we try to influence the listener by informing or affirming or rebuking or making common cause. When people speak instrumentally, trying to get leverage on each other, it's nearly impossible to listen receptively to what another says. We listen with half a mind at best, busily filtering what we hear so that we can embrace what we agree with and reject the rest. We listen, that is, with our egos. So that's the end of the quote. We listen with our egos. So what's the alternative? Palmer advocates for interactions that are expressive rather than instrumental. This means entering into conversation with no agenda, just a deep heart longing to see and know and better understand that other person. Listening expressively is about listening without judgment and giving the gift of our full attention, 100% of our attention. We ask only honest, open questions designed to help people access their own wisdom, and we refrain from our bad habits of fixing, saving, advising, or setting each other straight. In other words, we shut down our own interior dialogue. It's been said that normally when 2 people are having a conversation, there's actually 3 conversations going on. There are 2 internal monologues and 1 external conversation between the 2 people. Deep listening aims to cut that down to just one, just the speaker's internal dialogue, given space and voice and held gently and without judgment or reaction. Now, being listened to this way is amazing. Sometimes we hear ourselves say aloud, when we hear ourselves say aloud what we've been saying to ourselves, we discover all kinds of useful things. Sometimes our inner voices lie. They tell us we're not worthy, we're not loved, or we're ugly, or we're a failure, and we don't deserve to be happy. And there's something about saying these things aloud that makes it clear that they are falsehoods. So over time, we're able to zero in on the one voice that doesn't lie, the voice that's our deep wisdom that comes from our heart. And that voice cuts through all the lies. We learn who we really are, that each of us is beautiful and necessary, unique and powerful and beloved. But listening without fixing, saving, or advising, with our internal monologue paused so that we can give another our full and undivided attention, is transformative for the listener as well. We need to be able to avoid getting hooked as we do this practice, or figuring out how to get unhooked quickly if we do get hooked, because getting hooked is human. One way is to practice non-attachment. Our thoughts can be like clouds, and we can, as they pop up, we just don't grab hold of them. We let them go, and bring our attention back to the speaker. In a meditation called Listening as Spiritual Hospitality, Henry Nouwen writes, "To listen is very hard because it asks of us so much interior stability that we no longer need to prove ourselves by speeches, arguments, statements, or declarations. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They are free to receive, to welcome, to accept." In other words, true listeners bring our defenses down. And when we do that, everything lands differently, not in our head, not in our ego, but in our heart. And when we do that, the truth of the speaker's experiences and insights plant seeds in us. And those seeds often blossom in miraculous and unexpected ways. So this spiritual practice of listening is not easy, but it is simple. One thing that helps me is meditation or prayer. Parker Palmer recommends framing our conversations with moments of silence where we take just a few breaths to mentally hold the person who is about to speak in love. I have a practice of checking in with a dear friend and colleague every day. We do call it our soul check-in, and we start this way. We pause in silence for a moment, and one of the things that I do while we're pausing before my friend Dana speaks is I mentally run through the metta meditation. May you be filled with loving kindness. We talked about this a few weeks ago with Jamie Derrick. And so before we head into our first 5-minute pause or response time, I thought we could sing the version of the metta meditation that is set to music in our hymnal. And we're going to sing it. Imagine, you don't know yet who you're going to be in a group yet, but just hold the space and imagine the person and you are singing it to them. So here is, may you be filled with loving kindness.
May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole.
And I'd invite you to spend this next 5 minutes either discussing or reflecting individually on these questions. What are your experiences of listening deeply and of being heard deeply? Paul, go ahead and activate the breakout rooms, please. All right. And we'll move on to the second foundational spiritual practice, which is learning. I think most Unitarian Universalists identify as lifelong learners. But usually when we say that, we're talking about the sort of head learning, knowledge, facts, and that's awesome. Don't get me wrong. My experience with Unitarian Universalism, and I'm a lifelong UU, is that there's no shortage of curiosity. But there's a second component to learning as a spiritual practice, and that is humility. Humility. And I think there are some barriers in our culture to humility. We spoke 2 weeks ago about American exceptionalism, and that's a barrier, but there's a certain Unitarian Universalist exceptionalism that I see sometimes as well. There's a lack of humility that we can a trap that we can fall into, where we think that our answers are the right answers for everybody. And that's mostly as individuals as opposed to collectively. And the thing of it is that humility is especially important when we're talking about heart learning, when we're talking about growing wisdom. So embracing learning as a spiritual practice means moving through life, not just with curiosity, but with the awareness that there's a lot more that we don't know and can't know than that we do know. It means moving through life with the awareness that we are often wrong. Moving through life with the awareness that we make mistakes and that we hurt people. And above all, remembering that everyone has something to teach us. I find that feelings of shame often become barriers to learning. When we feel ashamed of not knowing something or misunderstanding something, when we feel ashamed of making mistakes or hurting people, the normal human tendency is to get defensive. And sometimes getting defensive means going on the offensive. And that's our ego at work. I think we see this in resistance to anti-racism initiatives. And we see it in our theological past. Our Unitarian ancestors believed in something called salvation by character. Salvation by character. So they felt that they needed to be upright and morally pure. And there was a huge emphasis on scholarship. Again, this sort of exceptionalism. One of the shifts that we're seeing in our Unitarian Universalist ministry is from the ideal of the learned ministry to the ideal of the learning ministry, from learned to learning. So rather than expecting my colleagues, rather than expecting ourselves to be learned and knowledgeable, we're trying to embrace a stance of continually learning. So humility, again. I went camping this week with my dear friend, Lois. Lois is wise and brilliant and experienced. She actually got ordained at least 10 years before I did. But she's also one of the least pretentious people I know. And one of our conversations, she just started waxing poetic about how much she's learning from the millennials on her staff. And, sometimes it's not easy for older folks to listen to and respect and embrace the wisdom of the younger generations. But I think this is a moment where that's really needed, especially when we look at these social movements that are being led by young people. I think we need to be prepared to get in line behind folks who are younger than we are. And it's not that we shouldn't respect our elders. It's just to remember that wise elders Wise elders continue learning from their younger friends. So it's not just for ministers, the shift from learned to learning. We're living in unprecedented times, which means there are no precedents. We don't know what we're doing. We have no experience. Um, so I think it's essential that we move forward with humility, willing to learn from everybody, willing to learn from our mistakes, and willing to let go of our desire to have everything figured out. So what most supports humility is self-compassion. We need to remember that we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be learned. We don't have to be wise. That it's right and normal and good to be always in process. We need to remember that mistakes aren't bad, so no shame. Mistakes are just part of being human, and they are gifts. They're an opportunity. And even when we hurt other people, rather than letting shame into our hearts, we need to accept accountability as a gift and trust our capacity to, when we know better, do better. The work of accountability, the work of holding one another accountable, and the work of allowing ourselves to be held accountable is absolutely essential as we try to weave our way into beloved community. We have to be willing to hear the ways that we've caused hurt and be changed, not by rules or cancel culture or whatever it is that they're accusing us of, but by our care for this other person. If somebody says what you said hurt me, what you did was painful, and we care about that person, we're going to shift our behavior or choose different words out of love. So, because the root of humility is self-compassion, this next time that we're going to sing the metta meditation, May I Be Filled, we're going to use the first person singular. So may I be filled. May I be filled with loving kindness. And then we'll go into our second 5 minutes of response time. And let's go through this again, how it's going to work. Because I know it worked for some people and not for others. If you click on participants, you can raise your hand. And this is the way you let Paul know that you'd like to be in a breakout room so that you can have a conversation. So you find your participants and then you raise your hand. If you can't find your participants button and you can't figure out how to raise your hand, you can put a message to Paul in the chat that you would like to be in a breakout room. Okay? The questions that we're going to ask, the icons are at the bottom. Yeah. The questions that we're going to ask after we sing will be, what are the attitudes that support heart learning, and what are the habits that get in the way? And I'll ask those again. Sorry, I forgot that we need to sing again. Let's sing.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole.
I think everybody's back now. So we'll shift to thinking about loving as a foundational spiritual practice. And of course, loving is necessary for the other two practices as well, right? Listening is loving someone enough to let their voice matter and give them the space to let their true voice emerge. Learning is about loving someone enough to let their experiences and perspective matter enough so that they change our hearts. The tagline of the UUCP is that what we do matters. And I love that. And I believe that with all my heart. But we're not just human doings, we are human beings, which means that who we are matters. Each of us precious and beloved, and each of us becoming, always becoming. The creation of beloved community is about loving in ever bigger circles, weaving connections of mattering to one another. It's about cultivating an awareness of interdependence instead of independence. Interdependence. We need one another. And I think that's why I keep coming back to this meta practice over and over again. There was an article by Mushim Patricia Ikeda in Lion's Roar, How to Practice Metta for a Troubled Time. And what she wrote is that when you practice metta, you kind of work up a ladder. You go from people like family and friends, people it's easy for you to feel goodwill toward, to those you don't know. And then, ascending as you are able to, not forcing anything, you extend wishes for safety, happiness, and peace to those you dislike and those you consider your enemies. Finally, at the ultimate level, you extend your goodwill to all living beings in the universe. It's a pretty tall order, although possible for some people, to feel loving and kind toward those who are perpetrators of violence and oppression. Even to feel goodwill toward them might be difficult, so we can frame this meditation as the cultivation of non-hatred and non-fear in order to become stronger, more stable, and more centered. Then we can move forward in a positive fashion to battle oppression and create some improvement for our communities and the United States overall. I'm fond of saying that the real dichotomy in life isn't between good and evil, but between love and fear. This is a society and a time when there's so much fear being pumped into our cultural systems. Fear makes us easier to manipulate. It keeps us in our limbic system. And we're just bombarded with messages meant to make us afraid and keep us afraid. Love, on the other hand, supports this process of organic and authentic growth. Love supports connection, interdependence. It's love that allows us to become the people, individually and collectively, that we are meant to be. Now, I imagine I'm a little freaked out at the moment by developments such as federal officers in unmarked vans snatching protesters off the street in Portland. Um, you may be a little freaked out too. It's pretty scary stuff. The thing is, though, we can't give in to that temptation to descend into fear. We need to stay in relationship. We need to stay in our right minds. We need to stay grounded in love. We need to stay in relationship with our neighbors, and I think in particularly those who have different opinions and perspectives. People are afraid. People are afraid of the uncertainty, but in the grander scheme, even before COVID, things are changing. Things are changing. The foundations of our society are falling apart and evolving, and it's hard to be on that unsteady ground. People are losing their way of life. People are losing their livelihood, and they're scared. So I think we need to connect and offer compassion and support. Now, um, maybe we can avoid some of the most rabid um, folks, some of the most hate-filled, and certainly none of us are obligated or even advised to be around people who don't respect boundaries, who are hateful and angry. Um, but there's a whole lot of other people who are in the middle. And the thing of it is, um, facts don't help. Offering facts really doesn't help people shift toward love and compassion. Exactly 0 people have changed their mind as a result of debates on social media, near as I can tell. But care, compassion, that helps people change. So there's a way in which, on the one hand, we can choose that we're not going to tolerate racism, homophobia, violence, exploitation. And yet we can offer compassion and maybe even reassurance to the people who are afraid of losing their livelihoods, that when we say we want a world where all people are free to become the persons they're called to be, that we mean everybody. Everybody, no exceptions. And it makes that process a little less scary and a little more appealing to offer that hopeful and inclusive vision. Now, loving ourselves is a prerequisite for our own journeys of becoming. We don't grow and evolve and change because we're forced or because we're afraid. We grow and evolve when we're able to start from that place of unconditional acceptance and then hear and respond to the voice that calls us forward. I think it's one of the central paradoxes of life that, I have to believe I'm completely okay, absolutely beloved, just the way I am, before I'm capable of change. By the same token, I believe that loving our neighbors unconditionally, offering them love and acceptance, may be the prerequisite for our collective evolution, for the moral development of our society. And so when I talk about love as a foundational practice, what I'm inviting us into is choosing to actively love ourselves and others. Whenever we confront a dilemma, whenever we have to make a choice, whenever we are in a disagreement or a conflict, we ask ourselves this simple and brilliant question posed by my colleague, the late Mary Harrington. In this moment, what is the most loving thing I can do? What is the most loving thing I can do? And we can ask ourselves that over and over and over again until we're asking it with every breath. What's the most loving thing that I can do in this moment with this person, toward myself, toward the world? We're going to sing the metta meditation one more time, and this time we're going to use "May we be filled."
May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
So raise your hands if you'd like to go into a breakout room. If it's already raised, you can just leave it up. And we will unmute you and send you on their way. Here are the questions. What gifts have you received when you've loved and accepted other people? And what gifts have you received when you've loved and accepted yourself? Our closing reading is by the Reverend Marta Valentine, Knows No Bounds. You must live and breathe. It must be the first thought in the morning and the last at night when twilight descends. It must be what you search for in the darkness, the light that leads you to find who you are, where you are, what you are. It is understood already that you would die for it, but would you be willing to be born again for it? Change your cells for it. If you were dying of thirst, it would be your only drink of water, the one liquid to quench your thirst, sate your parched soul, resuscitate your empty lungs. In the dead of winter, it will be your fire, blanket, scarf, and hat. In the desert, it would be your mirage and your oasis. Even when you don't want it, can't stand it, despise it, it will come looking for you, haunt you, track you down, beg your attention and your love. For the purpose that you were blessed with knows no bounds. Only that if you are not paying attention, you will be lost until it finds you, until you heed its call and be who and what you are meant to be. Let's sing together, There is a Love. Please say with me the words to embody our flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. And may you go forth then into this week, listening and learning and loving and living with joy and peace and compassion and kindness, and have some fun. Get out and see the comet if you haven't already. It's really cool. I love you all. I miss you. I'll see you soon. Go in peace.